This content was created purely for entertainment and informational purposes. The creators of this vlog do not endorse drinking and driving, debauchery, underage drinking, public intoxication, speeding, street racing or any other form of delinquency. I'm just a guy, with a drink, talking about cars. Please don't take this too seriously.
What up? It's your boy, the Killer Bee, the Fat Man, the Africanized Honeybee, the Car Guy Blog 05 at gmail.com, Guy at 05Carl on Twitter, at 05Carl on Instagram, at 05Carl on Facebook. The word zero, Z-E-R-O, the number 5, fifth, the word car, C-A-R. With me as always is my fabulous co-host, May Flowers. What up, May?
What up?
This is going to get interesting today.
Oh, yeah.
For listeners who follow this podcast, all 28 of you, 29 of you, if you've gone back in the archives, you know that May and I went to college together, but we didn't really go to college together. May was a freshman when I was a fifth year senior. And so we really only met at the end of that year. And I had 1 3-hour class remaining the next fall before I graduated. But we were vaguely on campus some of the same time. But the story I'm going to relate today was before she got there. So I'm going to have to set the table a little bit.
We're going in the Wayback Machine.
Way back machine. And let me just clear some things up right now. There are some facts that I'm going to recount that are pretty much known facts. There are some things I'm going to recount that are a little bit fuzzy. And I even reached out to my Decade alumni group. I checked the digital archives of our student newspaper. I checked yearbooks. I looked everywhere to try to find some more information, and I just couldn't, because that was the days before, cell phones with cameras in them and
before we lived our whole lives.
Our whole lives on social media, and you could always go back and pinpoint the exact time and day something occurred. So there are some things we know, and there are some things we're guesstimating. And when I asked my peer group, everybody, we got fuzzy answers. We narrowed it down to a 2-year span and not much else. But here we go. You know, or maybe you don't know, I lived in Scott Hall my first 3 years on campus.
Yes, that I think I did know.
Yeah. So, okay, full disclosure, May and I went to the same HBCU in the state of North Carolina, the infamous North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. Probably more well-known now than it was then, but still a commodity, a known thing. Good marching band, good basketball team, engineering school, business school, blah, 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 blah. Probably about half the size then of what it is now, as I think last enrollment was something like 13,000. When I was a freshman, our full-time equivalent was like 7,000. And of that, only about 4,000 of those were full-time students.
Yeah, I think when I started, it was somewhere around 7,000 or 8,000, something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were setting new records for freshman class every year, bigger and bigger and bigger, and the school's been growing steadily over these nearly 30 years. Ooh, it's scary to say. So in the fall of either my freshman or sophomore year, and it's sad we haven't narrowed that down, but 1992 or 1993. We had our annual career day, which is our big recruitment event held at our basketball arena, and all the companies come, and a lot of people like to deride it as the engineering job day, because most companies that come are looking for engineers, and they don't really have a lot to offer some of the other schools and colleges, but that's neither here nor there. I can attest
to that fact. That is the truth.
The point is, many, many large American companies are on campus for those 2-3 days, because they would have the career fair and then usually some on-campus interviews. Ford Motor Company showed up that year, and they didn't just bring their engineers and their HR people and their recruiters. They brought some cars. They brought a transporter, and on that transporter was a Ford Escort GT, a Ford Probe GT, the brand new second-generation Probe GT, and a Ford Mustang GT 5.0, as we used to call them. And they set up in the parking lot of our Student Memorial Union and had a little autocross situation. Now, this would literally be my first ever autocross. This would be my first time ever driving a car in a competitive and aggressive manner. Now let's take this into scope. I was either a freshman or sophomore. In either case, I did not have a car on campus. And the only car I had been driving to that point in my life was a 1989 Hyundai Excel, with the slight exception of a 1991 Dodge Caravan, which I drove very sparingly because that was my parents' car. And also it was a Dodge Caravan, which even as a high school and early college student, the Hyundai was always cooler than the minivan. That's just, even though the Hyundai was definitely a shitbox. Okay, so picture this. I go to career day. I'm not going to get a job because, freshman year, I had no courses. Sophomore year, I had only freshman year classes under my belt. I was looking for maybe, a summer internship or something, but I wasn't going to get a job. So it was just a thing for me to do. I come back, I see them setting up the cars. I see the table full of helmets. I'm like, what in the bleep? So I wander over and they're like, yeah, if you got a driver's license, get in line, get a helmet, drive a car. Okay. So I did all three. I went back to the dorm, drop off my stuff, which Scott Hall, as you know, was right directly across the street from that parking lot. And in fact, my room on the third floor actually had a clean sight line of that parking lot and Mitchell Drive. I mean, I used to hear a lot of things out of that window. Saturday nights after gym jams, I'd hear all the hubbub and hustle and bustle up and down the strip, assuming I wasn't out there in it. The thing that was most clear to me was the marching band marching by on their way to practice and then on their way back to the band room playing Good to Go's Never Satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that song is seared into my memory. The horn parts and the low horn parts and the woodwind
all of the parts,
like
all of that
parts. Me and my boys, we used to walk around campus mimicking the band arrangement of that song because it was played so much, to the point where they even break it out now for nostalgia purposes and play it occasionally at football games now because alumni my age pop when they hear it.
I'll say just for us old folks.
Yes, just for us old folks. Because young people are like, what song is this? I don't know this song. But, just, back and forth every day. So there's some of the things that just are memories that come to me as I'm sitting at that window doing my homework because my engineering classes were in the morning and then my math and science classes were normally in the afternoon. The split being that the engineering class was on the south end of campus and all my math and science classes were on the north end of campus, and the dorm was sort of the dividing line. So you always try to arrange your schedule so you didn't have to transit from the far end of campus back and forth constantly. You do one end in the morning and one end in the afternoon. So typically I do all my engineering classes in the morning, grab lunch, come back to the dorm, do some homework, go to my calculus, business, physics, or chemistry class in the afternoon, come back to the dorm, do more homework. So on this particular day, they set up the autocross. I go to my calculus class. I come back. I do the autocross. I drove the probe. And I think I drove the probe mostly because it was a 5-speed, but also it was more powerful than my Hyundai, but it was still front-wheel drive and not scary like the Mustang, because anybody knows anything about a Fox body 5-liter Mustang is they crash a lot. I mean, there's YouTube pages dedicated to Mustang fails. It's just a known thing. I grew up in an army town, lots of young guys with 5-liter Mustangs, lots of 5-liter Mustangs wrapped around guardrails, telephone poles, trees, upside down in ditches, et cetera, et cetera. My self-preservation instinct told me, don't mess with the Mustang. So I got the probe. The probe was very fast indeed compared to my Hyundai and reasonably quick compared to the Escort GT. And for those of a certain age, in the late 80s and early 90s, the Escort GT was sort of like the American Volkswagen GTI. It was the car that was just zippy enough that if you were a teenager or in your young 20s and you needed a quote unquote fast car that you could still afford to insure, the Escort GT was sort of your bag there. That was the Honda CRX, the Honda Civic, Honda Prelude, Volkswagen GTI, Volkswagen Scirocco, and or Corrado, depending on what year. But this was also just the time that the sort of the hotter cars, your Mitsubishi Diamond Star triplets, your Plymouth Laser, Mitsubishi Eclipse, and Eagle Talon had just come on the scene a couple of years before that. The S13 240SX was around. The scene was starting to change. The Probe GT had jumped in there. So it was slightly a different class of automobile, but the Escort GT was still hanging on as a cool car, if not a fast car. But I chose the Probe. The course consisted of a little short slalom and then a big sweeper. And I remember I smoked the inside tire on the sweeper because the Probe did not have a limited slip differential, which was very rare on factory released cars in those days. So the inside tires turned into smoke and I didn't care. I was having fun. I give them the helmet back and my time is insignificant. It's, it wasn't particularly fast. I definitely wasn't in the top 10 or anything. So I went on about my business. Back to the dorm, start working on my homework, and I can hear the cars through the window. Vroom, 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 little tires screeching here and there. And not too long after I got back to the room, I heard the unmistakable sounds of yeah. And I looked out my window and it was slightly obscured by the transporter, but clearly two of the cars had come together. Now, again, this is one of those deals where memories get fuzzy after 30 years. I always thought that the Mustang had crashed into the Escort. Somebody else was of the opinion that the Escort had crashed into the Probe. Whatever the case was, one car was moving, one car was parked at the starting line waiting to start, and they came together. Well, Ford put the vehicles back on the transporter, packed up their shit, and left. And,
can you blame them?
They never brought an autocross back to our campus during the remaining 3 to 4 years that I was there as an undergraduate student. And some would question the logic of having an autocross on a college campus, but that's neither here nor there. What I
you
do
would like
know,
to believe that you would trust college. Engineers are supposed to be smart, right?
well, yeah, that don't mean they can drive good though. Especially, essentially we're teenagers, and you know how teenagers are with driving. But
very true.
It was very interesting, and I went back and again, I did go to my alumni decades Facebook group, and I asked some questions, and I got all kinds of answers. I drove the Probe and had the second best time. Then I did it again when they set up for Howard's homecoming. This happened around my birthday. That was an awesome effing birthday too. I can't remember the year. I'm guessing 93 or 94, and I thought it was the Probe that crashed into the Escort. I absolutely remember that event. It was 92 or 93. As I was gone in 94, I had a good friend who was Mr. Car Guy who just knew he was going to win and got his ass dusted. Man, I remember that day. I was waiting to drive the Probe when the crash happened. Later in my adult life, I thought, why did they ever think that was a good idea? Another comment. Did they think we were going to go through the course at 5 miles per hour? Hell no, we racing. I remember when I walked up to the Union parking lot, I was like, oh, no, they didn't. Must have been 1993, and they never came back to campus. Got up out of there. I was about to get my second chance to drive, and they shut that thing down quick. Grand opening, grand closing. I got a lot of history of driving vehicles through, I'm not going to say that, but I did not wreck not one Ford motor vehicle. That was a person who it was accused of being the person that had crashed.
I just want to know who got fired after this event.
Someone said it was 1992. I'm sitting here like, I remember that, but then I started thinking, saying, maybe it happened in 94, but I left in December of 93. They said it was a cat named Bleep that crashed the car. God was with all those who were standing around watching. Luckily, there were no fatalities. I was safe perched on the wall at the Union. Okay, there were no injuries. Let me be clear about that. I think, well, I won't say no injuries. There were probably some minor shakeups from the cars hitting one another, but like there weren't any pedestrian injuries or bystander. All I know is that a girl had the best time. I drove the probe, and somebody says it was a member of a sorority that I'm not going to name who had the same make and model of Mustang. Yeah, well, all I know is I got the autocross bug big that day, but did not get to drive a car in that manner again until 1999, after I'd been out of school and had bought my own 240SX and had gotten involved in autocrossing with a club in a different part of North Carolina. And it's funny because motorsports is a big part of the reason why I ended up majoring in engineering in college. Originally, I was going to go to another large Southern university and participate in their Formula SAE team, and that did not work out. When I got to A&T, of course, they did not have a Formula SAE team, although they did eventually get one. They also got a Legends car. They got a mini Baja. They did have a mini Baja team, which I dabbled with a little bit, but the time commitment was too much for a person with my GPA. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Priorities.
Well, I didn't have any choice. I was about to flunk out. I mean, I never got put on academic probation, but I came real close. And I knew people who had gotten sent home for a semester. So I did not want to be one of those folks. I don't think my parents would have tolerated that very well.
No, they wouldn't have been happy.
Yeah. Anyway, all of that to say that this particular incident that happened on the campus of North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in the fall of either 1992 or 93 obviously made an impact on some people. And it's funny about how we lived our lives in the days before cell phones and the constant logging and documenting of every moment of our lives. We all remember things, but we remember them a little bit differently. And we find out that human beings are bad eyewitnesses. But everybody has a memory about that event, and it's funny how that happens. People who are way across campus, of course, heard about it. Oh, I heard they crashed the cars into each other and 17 people got killed. You know how telephone, telegraph, college student. But
yes.
And even and that was the thing. I did not physically witness it. I heard it through my dorm window. And when I got up and looked out, the transporter truck was obscuring my view. So all I know is that two cars crashed and they put the cars back on the transporter. And in my mind, it was the Mustang and the Escort. I have yet to be able to fully confirm that, but that's what sticks in my mind. And of course, the two other people I could ask, they lived on the opposite side of the hall, so their window didn't overlook the student union parking lot. My roommate was out of the room at the time. The gentleman that lived in the room next door, he's fuzzy. He says he knows it happened, but he don't remember the hows or whys, probably because he wasn't there at the time. So everybody has a different version of that memory, but it's still important in my life because that was a thing that sparked me onto the idea of performance driving as an amateur and something other than a road race. Up to that point in my life, I thought you could only be like a showroom stock race car driver or Indy or Formula One or NASCAR driver. It never occurred to me that there was such a thing as grassroots motorsports that did not cost an arm and a leg and did not require you to have a fully built race car.
I think seeing a car like that in college probably would have changed a lot of people's lives. I mean, if nothing else, just for the sheer exposure as another sport, another outlet, another hobby. But yes. I'm surprised more people don't have memories of it because I would feel like that would be a story that would get around.
And it probably is, but, it's one of those deals where, it's a Facebook group and it's a decade Facebook group. So everybody, if you started school in 90 or 91, you weren't there necessarily when it happened if you had moved off campus already. Or if you lived over in Barbie, Morrow, Morrison, Curtis, Holland, you had no eyewitness of that unless you happen to have been transiting to or from class at the moment. And if you were, let's say you were cutting the sidewalk over by Cooper, you heard it, but you probably didn't see it.
You didn't see it.
If you were on the other side, say you were ROTC cadet and you were in Campbell Hall, you probably couldn't even hear it from there, because you had the union and the walls of the ROTC building between you and the occurrence. If you were in class in the science or engineering or English or business building, you might have heard it, maybe, depending on what classroom you were in, but you didn't see it. So there's a lot of, if-then statements that kind of build to only a limited number of people physically witnessing it, or the number of people who maybe drove one of the cars that day, and so knew that event occurred, but maybe didn't find out about the crash till a week later or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving pieces there that play into that. But I had to ask the group because I was like, I know some of y'all were there. Let's hear it. And really, I was looking for anybody that might have had a photo or, was an eyewitness or something. But I had trouble, because again, I don't know about some of them, but I took 3 pictures my freshman year, and they were all they were all from move-in week. Because I had to take the camera back home to get the film developed.
Right. I took pictures at the end of my freshman year because I didn't think I was coming back. But so I took a whole bunch of pictures toward the end of my freshman year because I was like, I'm probably not going to see these people anymore.
See, that wasn't even, for me, it was like the opposite. It was, I had a roll of film from senior year of high school and summer that wasn't done. So I took it with me move-in weekend to take some pictures, to finish out the roll and send it back with Dad and have it developed. And I didn't have a camera on campus with me again as a regular thing, probably until I was a junior.
Yeah, these kids don't know nothing about that.
Big gap where I have a couple of pictures from freshman year and then a huge run of pictures starting from like the 94, 95 school year on. And even then, because you had to have film and you had to get it developed, you didn't carry a camera everywhere.
I didn't have a car. It was
actually, when I finally did get a car, I didn't often have money to have prints made. So it was pick your spots, but you didn't carry a camera everywhere because some things didn't need pictures. And, for people that don't know what it's like taking pictures with a film camera, even an automatic style point and shoot film camera, they had very limited ranges of situations you could use them. Like the little cheap 35 millimeter point and shoots were almost useless if you were indoors and you were more than about 10 feet from your subject, because that's about how far your flash could shoot.
Yeah.
So if you were at something like a gym jam or something at the auditorium or a step show or something like that, camera was useless unless you wanted to shoot the person sitting right next to you. Football games, same thing. You didn't have enough of a zoom lens from the stands to get anything good on the field. Everybody in the field is just little blue and yellow dots. So you shoot the people in the stands next to you maybe, but that gets old quick. Some things you didn't need to have photographic evidence of. As our later generations would start to learn, everything don't need a picture.
Everything does not need a picture or a video. And as they are continuing to learn the hard way, everything should not be uploaded to the internet.
Right. For the most part, people in my generation, our college dirt remains safely obscured behind fuzzy memories and lack of photos.
Exactly. And that's where I'd like to keep it.
Boom.